So far today, Donald Trump has been sitting feet away from Stormy Daniels as she recounted the sexual encounter she said that they had in 2006. Trump has repeatedly denied that occurred. CNN's Kaitlan Collins just emerged from the court. A lot to talk about. Well, tell everything.
I mean, it's hard to even know where to start. I mean, just to be in that room when she entered. There was another witness who testified before her this morning, but by that point, it had been made publicly known that Stormy Daniels was going to be the next witness to be called to testify. And the attorneys addressed it right at the beginning of court before the jury actually came in. So it kind of just loomed over that entire testimony. I mean, no one was even really paying attention to what the Penguin Random House employee was saying.
Although there were a lot of interesting quotes from various books by Trump about how he micromanaged business.
Yeah,
I hear your point.
It was very interesting, but it just had nothing on what was about to come, and I think everyone understood that. And when Stormy Daniels walked into that room, I mean, she later testified that she and Donald Trump have not been that she had not seen him since 2007, the summer of 2007, when they were in Los Angeles.
She walks in from the side and actually walks behind the table where Trump is.
She walks in, the witness walks in from a side entrance, and so Donald Trump is already seated in there with his defense team, so his back is to her. But she's over at the witness stand, which, as we reported yesterday, you can actually see the defendant, Donald Trump, from the witness stand, but he has this monitor in front of her, and he was watching it very closely. I mean, his eyes were on this monitor almost the entire time. He was not closing his eyes like he's been doing in other days of testimony. And there was this one moment where she'd been on the stand briefly, just describing who she was, where she grew up, her backstory. And the prosecution asked her to identify Donald Trump. And she had to kind of stand up in her seat a little bit, and she pointed at him and identified him as the person in the navy jacket. And he looked over towards the witness stand as this happened. It was this remarkable moment where she was just doing something as simple as identifying him.
And you, as you reported yesterday, based on talking to somebody else who had testified previously, the reason people have trouble identifying where Donald Trump is because from the witness stand, you cannot see you cannot see Donald Trump.
No, because and I looked closer today after a witness who testified in this case told me that the judge's bench does extend out so far, and where they're kind of tucked away over by the jury and looking more directly at the prosecution. And Donald Trump is seated in the middle of his defense table with an attorney to his right. So it's not direct eye contact. That's why Trump's often looking straight ahead at this screen. But I mean, this is the biggest witness to testify easily so far in the 13 days of this trial. I think there was a lot of questions about whether or not she was actually going to take the stand, but the prosecution called her this morning. I mean, it was the most salacious details that we've seen as she went into her alleged affair with Donald Trump, which he denies to this day.
More salacious, it seemed, than the judge wanted.
More salacious than the judge wanted, because at times, I mean, she was going into, not even just salacious, I mean, it was very detail heavy. This is something that also stood out to me, is Donald Trump has always denied this affair and said that, Stormy Daniels was not his type. He's talked about her a lot at his rallies when I was covering him inside the White House. She laid out so many instances of where not only when they met in 2006 at the Lake Tahoe golf tournament and the subsequent conversations she had, other meetings that they had, phone calls where he would call and she'd put him on speaker, and there were dozens of witnesses essentially to their interactions. Her assistant, her publicist, her boyfriend at one time drove her to an interaction with Donald Trump where she went and met with him in Beverly Hills, and he waited in the car. And so it also just speaks to Trump's denials of this. I mean, she had a level of detail about the tile in his hotel room in Lake Tahoe, the double doors, what they were talking about. There were parts where he was muttering to his attorney and looked increasingly irritated as she was continuing to testify about these details of their interactions. There were moments where, when the jury was out of the room and they took a break, the judge kind of scolded the prosecution and talked about the level of detail that she was going into, saying it wasn't really relevant and that she just needed to directly answer the question. And twice while she was answering her questions, that was another interaction that happened where he said, just directly answer that. You don't have to tell kind of a whole story about it.
How did the jury seem to be responding to her?
They were paying really close attention. And she came in, she was very conversational and casual. She did seem a bit nervous at the beginning. She was speaking very quickly as she was answering her questions, so fast that on several occasions the prosecution had to ask her to stop and to slow down because the court reporters couldn't actually get what she was saying. And so it was this fascinating moment. And then, she was going into all of these details and talking about how Trump never had asked her to keep their affair quiet or to hide it. And they were clearly getting up to the point to where then the Access Hollywood tape comes out and Trump's running for president, and why there was that renewed interest in her story.
It seemed like she was making sort of jokes or things, laughing, saying things she thought were funny. And did the jury respond?
It wasn't completely clear. You know, I was in there when Keith Davidson was testifying, and he was kind of this compelling witness. He looked directly at the jury. She was directly addressing the jury as well, and trying to be conversational. I mean, she made jokes about, you know, the adult film industry and contests that they have, and the irony of them sponsoring certain golf tournaments. It wasn't clear that the jury was necessarily laughing at it. There was a moment where she was describing her first dinner with Donald Trump. And she had Keith Schiller, everyone who knows Donald Trump and has covered him, this was his longtime bodyguard. She had his contact in her phone, and his name was Keith Trump. That's how she had it saved in her phone, because she didn't know what his last name was. And she was describing going into that dinner, and she didn't necessarily want to go, she said, but her publicist encouraged her to go and said, you know, what's the worst that could happen? And she kind of laughed about that because she's now in a courtroom testifying about that very dinner and where it led to all of this.
We've heard from court stenographers asking witnesses to slow down in what they say, but it seemed like that happened a lot. A lot of people were asking her to slow down.
I counted 4 times where she was asked to slow down because she was just speaking really quickly. And, you know, there were moments where she was going into incredible detail, including that moment when she met Donald Trump in his hotel in 2006. They were supposed to have dinner. They didn't actually eat dinner, she testified, but she talked about how she went into the bathroom at one point. She was looking through, you know, his DOP kit that was in the bathroom and what products he had. And she
shampoo. I believe
yeah,
it was.
and Old Spice was also one of the products. And she came out. I mean, I'm telling you, this level of detail that she was going into. But she came out and she said that he was undressed on the bed, that he was in boxers and a T-shirt, and that I wrote this down because you could kind of just hear this cacophony of clicks in the courtroom because no phones are allowed, so everyone's on their phone in there. And she said that it was like the blood had rushed out of her arms and her legs, that she had been upside down. That was the feeling that she had of kind of, what did I get myself into? What is this situation that she made clear he didn't force her to do anything, but she kind of felt like she had put herself in a bad situation by being in his hotel room that night.
Yeah. Caitlin Collins, thank you.